I call to order the June 8th, 2017 business meeting and ask Laurel Buttman to take the roll.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I want to first introduce our county council today is Chris Story, and Mary Rathke is sitting in as clerk to the board. Roll call, Commissioner Humberston.
Here.
Commissioner Fisher.
Here.
Commissioner Schrader.
Here.
Commissioner Savas.
Here.
And Chair Bernard.
Here. With that, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I just want to, I was just reading this. First off, we have citizen communication, and because this isn't a hearing, this item on resolution, I'm just going to call them all for the citizen communication, because this isn't open for a public discussion.
Yeah, it's a public discussion item.
Oh, it is? Okay, all right. So the first item, we have Brian Johnson. Oh, Brian Johnson. And Chris Howes. Please join us. Tell us what community you live in and
I live in Gladstone.
your name.
Brian Johnson, I live in Gladstone. So did Happy Valley pull out of the Parks District?
Not yet.
Well, I think they're going to.
There's a
So-
letter of intent.
Okay, so after you build them their multi-million-dollar ball field and you give them a brand-new library, and you run their brand-new library for free for how many years? But then you want to fight Gladstone for their measly million. Okay. And I noticed that like 3 meetings ago that Jim had talked about your affordable housing units up off a body. I think you said they were like $268,000 a piece.
$258 a square foot.
So what's the total price per unit?
Couldn't tell you. I imagine
It's about
very-
400,000 by the time you give the guy 60 years of not paying property taxes. You can live in my place. My qualifications live in my place are easier than the county. But you're going to give a guy 60 years of not paying property taxes. And I noticed Ken was talking about the flaggers and all on 122nd, I believe 135th. That's the one where I came across your pervious concrete. You're going to do the sidewalks, people's driveway. I'd like to see the soil sample the county took to make sure that that perks into the ground. Because if you're going to drain all this surface area into the ground, you surely would have took a soil test. And speaking of the wheelchair ramps, handicap ADA ramps, who's going to pay for the engineering changes on 135th, 122nd to make the wheelchair ramps comply? The taxpayer or the engineers you hired to draw them?
I don't have an answer for that.
Would it surprise you that the ADA ramps on your brand new Monterey aren't right?
The brand new what? What'd you say?
Brand new Monterey Street? And for the ones you don't know, that's the one where the county built like the bridge over the property line. And have we closed Barlow Zimmerman yet?
I have no idea.
For 3 years, I've come up here and asked these same questions, just like I still don't understand when we have a meeting and like your engineers that are, I mean, your field inspectors, to how good they are, but then you ban them from jobs if they find stuff you don't like. And I've been starting to give people from Salem a tour of some of your things that, like Strawberry Lane, to try to get to the bottom of why these happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more thing. Can I have one more second?
Chris?
I'd
Oh,
like
go
to
ahead.
take Sonia on a tour too. I've taken Ken and I've taken Paul.
Yeah,
I'd
please.
love to show you like our housing compared to the county's housing in a few of these projects.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Chris?
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Chris Hawes. I'm a resident of Damascus, and I'm here to speak in support of, I believe it's item D2 on your consent agenda, the sale of the Damascus Lane property to the Clackamas Fire District. This effort to get this property to the Clackamas Fire District began 2 years ago. A lovely citizen to my left behind me here, Lynn Kellis, brought that to the City Council, and we just tried to get them to give it to the fire department at that point because we were facing disincorporation, and they declined to do so, which has brought us into the situation we've been. And I really want to thank the county staff. Laurel especially has been working with the staff at Clackamas Fire to reach an agreement that would work for everyone. And this agreement, this sale of this property will allow significant savings to be seen because, as you probably know, Station 16 up here in Oregon City is going to be replaced. The contractor will be able to basically daisy chain a new Station 19 in Damascus, and we'll see significant savings in design, in project management, and in construction itself because of the ability to do the work together. It's also going to be a great step for our community because, as you know, we had a fire station in Damascus that was really never meant to be used 24/7. And as of Easter morning, it wasn't really meant to be used at all. We had a slight little issue with a fire at a fire station. And our little community is kind of just fresh out of fire stations. So this is going to be a great asset to our community. It's going to be a wonderful step forward. We're really looking forward to working with Clackamas Fire to bring a new fire station to our community and the upgraded service that it'll bring to all our community. So I appreciate the efforts that you have all made to reach an agreement that everyone can live with. And I strongly encourage you to vote yes on that item so that our community can have a nice new step forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Chips Jagger and Les Poole. Thank you. Chips, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Good morning. Last night we had an opportunity to introduce some of the commissioners to a process which is going on in Oak Grove, which we're very excited about. It's the fact that a group of citizens are working with county staff, working to requesting and writing a grant from Metro so that we can begin work around the light rail station to begin the revisualization and development of that. And it's a very exciting process. It hasn't taken place before. It's never happened in Clackamas County or at Metro, where a group of citizens have worked with people from the county or a city like this to request a grant. So we're quite excited about it and glad we were able to talk about it. I'm not here really to talk about that today. I'm here to talk about a land use issue which is taking place also in our community. Some of you may have heard about it. The old Par Lumber, which is right on Oak Grove across from Fred Meyer, at the center, one of the centers of our community. There has been a request, and it is being reviewed right now, to put in one of the things that will be one of the huge and extraordinary blight on our community, which is right in the center. To be built is a 30-foot walled storage unit area, not a mini storage, a large storage area that'll utilize that entire area where Par Lumber was. It has been described as suddenly someone dropping a prison into our community, because that's what it will look like. Blank walls, 30 feet, in one of the centers and one of really the best properties there. It's done by Formula. A company comes in and does it because property values there will merit it. Our land use group has, in our CPO, has written a response to begin at least describing some of the reasons why it shouldn't be there. What we want to do is appeal to you. What I'm here to appeal to you to find some way that even though everything in our area is C3, it does, for the most part, although it needs a very important traffic study because the traffic will be terrible in that area, we're appealing to the commissioners to investigate this, look at it. It's something that would be a blight on our community for a long time. It will take the center of our community, an area that should be creating jobs as well as creating residences. This will create absolutely no employment and use one of the prime areas of our community. So I'm turning this over to, this is our land use report from our little committee to the commissioners, so you guys can have a chance to look and see what we've written. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Savas.
Chips, I have a question and then I want to make a comment. So I haven't seen your report. I'm glad to hear that you expressed concerns. Did your group, as your CPO, as your primary function, recommend this for approval or deny the approval?
No, it hasn't really. It's actually approached each of these areas and made comments about it. I don't think that this is an approval. I think this is comments on it. And that's the way I read it, because it doesn't say we're approving it. It just says these are the issues that we find with it.
Okay.
So,
So I thought that the land use, your committee, your subcommittee that works on that is charged with making a recommendation for one or the other. So I'm curious as to which one of the others it is.
I don't think that this is a recommendation for approval. I think that this is a series of comments from traffic studies to wall to the treatments of the wall to the non-human aspect of this entire development. The way I read it, and it was just sent to me last night, so I'm going to hand it to you the way it was sent to me.
Well, thanks, and I appreciate you bringing that to my attention because I probably share a number of those concerns and probably more because I know this area pretty well. And for over 10 years, 12 years, I've been trying to draw attention to the fact that how dangerous this road is, Kellogg Road and Oak Grove Boulevard near that intersection because of that turn, that curvature of the road today, absent any new development. And fortunately, I got a little bit of money to fix the other end of Kellogg at Risley because of a severe safety issue there. But safety is a key element there from a traffic standpoint, a pedestrian standpoint. There are no sidewalks on Kellogg that abut this property or nearby, and it's extremely dangerous for people to cross the road. And I have witnessed accidents, near accidents, and know that people have actually had collisions there because of the blind curve and becomes blind when the turn bay is filled with cars. One cannot see when turning left on Oak Grove Boulevard onto Kellogg, and this is exactly where this particular property or storage facility is proposed. And I would encourage anyone at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a business day, let alone probably even a weekend as well, to just stand there and try to cross the road, try to cross Oak Grove Boulevard from Kellogg or this particular site to the Fred Meyer Shopping Center. It's extremely dangerous. So that's a huge concern, as well as, it doesn't fit
It doesn't fit.
the character of what that is and really what we want our community to be. But that's unfortunately, it is a property right. So I'm hoping that we can at least address the safety concerns and talk about that. But we had a great discussion last night about that, and I think I'm pretty well share the sentiments of everything that was said there last night.
At this point, there doesn't seem to be a traffic study involved, and we have requested very strongly that there be a traffic study so that those issues could be addressed.
Yeah, well, both Jim and I have made contact with our planning staff, apparently, so hopefully we'll be able to at least talk, and I'm going to try to pull in our traffic safety people on this, our experts on this, to help look at this issue, because the nature of this business might draw vehicles that are longer, taller, and actually create more of a sight issue, because there is a sight issue created actually by the vehicles themselves because the road curves.
Right. There's some illustrations in this that show that, and I'll leave this with,
Martha, you turned your light off?
I'm okay. I think that Commissioner Savas has answered my questions.
The only other thing I'd suggest is maybe a letter to ODOT, because the distance of that intersection is not very far. And other developments that we have denied have issues very similar to that. So I think I would write ODOT a letter of concern about the visibility from that intersection. Ken?
Chips, I just had a question. Are there any other studies that you think might be helpful that you would like to request? And if you don't have that in front of you now,
Yes.
would you see to it that you get that to any one of us in the near
definitely
future?
will. Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Les?
Good morning, Les Poole. I lived in Oak Grove for 22 years, and now I live a few blocks down the road in Gladstone. I could take my entire time talking about the library, and my vantage point is being a member of both communities, but that's an issue that we're going to wait till we see it on the agenda. By the way, I agree with what was just shared. I go out of my way and have for 24 years avoided that intersection. I go around it. And so by all means, anything that can be done to not shut down development there, but address the growing traffic concerns would be great. I was on Oakfield Road, and I'm here to talk about roads today. I ask you all, anyone that has an opportunity, drop off of 205 at Oakfield Road. And I use Oakfield Road as an example because it traverses 3 communities, and it's a county road. And when you roll up to Rothy Road, I'd like you to take a good look at the conditions there and consider at 3 o'clock what it's like with the school kids. At 4:30 last Friday, a week ago Friday, I counted 32 cars lined up at that light southbound in rush hour. Obviously, we're going to have southbound traffic there. And of course, talk about no sidewalks, no maintenance, nothing. We could talk forever about the roads. But what I really wanted to do was share some reflections on my testimony at the transportation budget hearing. I encourage the county to stay involved. We're a few weeks away from conclusion in Salem. The budget that you're proposing, the bill for transportation, is so huge that it may end up going nowhere without some serious considerations. My testimony, of course, encouraged improving 205 at Stafford. There's a multitude of other places that money could go, but if you don't relieve Stafford, how are we going to even be able to work on I-5? So let's continue to pursue that. Our friends from Damascus could tell you about the roads. I'm sure a few of them right now are visualizing Sunnyside Road. We've got 170,000-foot new Fred Meyers and development there, right there on 172nd. Sunnyside dumps into Damascus with a 1916 intersection, and next to that, Foster comes in with a 1917 Wagon Road intersection. So roads are critical, and hopefully anything we can do to efficiently spend road money would be greatly appreciated in the future. And I'll close with, we need to hear more about what's going to happen budget-wise. Is the county considering some type of a maintenance fee or a registration fee? And I don't think you'll necessarily have an answer until the legislature's done with their work. But this is something that I may sound like I'm a broken record on, but that's because the record is broken. Thank you.
Thanks, Les. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, this is not necessarily a message to the speaker here or the presenter, but it's more of a topic that with the legislative session occurring regarding the transportation bill and the exact mathematical composition of how those funds are derived, we have been involved a lot in the shaping of some of that. And so I'm going to have on issues for Tuesday that discussion on what exactly part of that we are supportive and what we have concerns about. I didn't have a chance to follow up with Commissioner Bernard because he went and spoke on Monday to the legislature. So we have been presented with a spreadsheet that basically outlined what revenues would be derived and how they would be spent and so on. And so included in there is about, as proposed, it would roughly bring us about $9 million in transportation dollars that we can use for maintenance and capital, either or. So that would be significant for the county, and the cities would get a chunk of that, and the state would get even a larger chunk of that. And it would fix our design to work on the 3 bottlenecks, 205 being one of those. So we're hoping that that will take a lot of the pressure off on a local issue, a local area, or the county especially, in regards to some of our maintenance needs.
Ken?
On the same issue, not so much directed at you, but just for the general public's information, assuming we get the $9 million, I want people to understand that we're falling behind at the rate of $17 million a year. So $9 million doesn't cover it. We're about $300 million a year behind as we sit here in terms of basic road maintenance. We're not even talking about road construction, but just basic road maintenance. And all 10 counties that put a gas tax on the ballot last November, all 10 failed. At some point, we're going to have to make some decisions as a county as to how we're going to pave those roads and leave a better infrastructure for the next, or at least a functional infrastructure for the next generation. Whether that will be another attempt at a gas tax or a vehicle registration fee, I don't know. But even as the program that was proposed last November didn't cover the $17 million shortfall. So I'm saying this so that everybody in this audience and anybody who is listening will begin to get a sense of what we need to do in terms of investment in our transportation infrastructure. And that's not the only infrastructure we're talking about as a county commission, but that is certainly one that affects all of us every single day. So frankly, at some point and in some manner, all of us will end up having to pony up more money to fix those roads. That's what it is going to come down to. We'll be working on that. I don't know what conclusion we will come to in terms of how we do it, but we're going to have to pony up and do something. So then
Anyway,
that's the scope of what we're dealing with. Thank you, Mr.
Les,
Chairman.
I remember one time, and tell me if I'm wrong, you said if the money for vehicle registration fee was spent in the county, you would support it. And I'm hoping that we can come to a place where you can support the potential vehicle registration fee.
It was actually, I said that if the money went for a small gas tax towards the roads, I would support it. We came back with 8 cents, and I think that was too much for the voters. And
Actually, I'm referring to the Selwood Bridge $5.
no,
You don't
no.
remember?
No,
Oh, I'm going to
that's
have
all
to
right.
look that up. 'Cause
There's
I
been a lot
swear
of
you
history,
said that.
so I appreciate your remembering me, but not about that.
Okay, Commissioner Savas.
I just want to follow up. I do remember some folks, I don't recall if it was less or not, but I do remember some people saying if that $5 was spent in Clackamas County, we would support the $5 vehicle registration fee. But whether we charge $5 for the vehicle registration fee or we charge the maximum amount allowed by law in the vehicle registration fee and included the $9 million, we still are short.
Yep.
So the vehicle registration fee is not a silver bullet, nor is the transportation bill. But as I stated, I think the $9 million will take some of the pressure off and help us along, so.
Thank you. So the next item is a public discussion item, approval of a resolution for the purpose of affirming Clackamas County as a welcoming and inclusive county. So we're going to ask Emmett to come up. Emmett's the Assistant County Administrator and has aided us in development of this resolution along with other folks.
Emmett, over there.
Board of County Commissioners, Chairperson Jim Bernard, and Deputy County Administrator Laurel Buttman. Good morning. As you are aware, County Administrator Don Krupp has tasked me with executive leadership responsibility for developing, maintaining, and advancing the county's commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion as key values and important strategic results. This morning, I submit for your consideration and adoption the resolution titled Resolution for the Purpose of Affirming Clackamas County as a Welcoming and Inclusive County, commonly referred to as the Inclusivity Resolution. Commissioners, increased emphasis placed on immigration and customs enforcement by the federal government continues to create confusion and consternation about the role of public sector jurisdictions with regard to immigration and customs enforcement. As the county's duly elected commission, periodically you receive requests to partner with other government officials, civil rights and social justice advocacy groups, as well as concerned persons in declarations of non-support for immigration and customs enforcement activity. This resolution affirms the board's commitment to valuing equity, diversity, and inclusion in Clackamas County by providing stability, opportunity, safety, and justice for everyone living and working in Clackamas County, especially in light of immigration and customs enforcement activity. With that said, I think a full reading of the proposed resolution with subsequent requests for its adoption is warranted.
Any questions? All right, well, we'll move on to public, pardon?
He wants to read it.
Well, actually, another commissioner is asked to read that after we have the discussion or hear from the public. So we'll start with Laura Henning and William Street. And please tell us the general community, where you're from, and your name. Thank you for coming.
I am Laura Hennig. I live in Oregon City. I do not support the resolution affirming Clackamas County as a welcoming and inclusive county because it prohibits, quote, the use by law enforcement of county funds, personnel, and/or equipment solely for the enforcement of federal immigration laws, unquote. The preamble to the United States of America says, quote, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America, end quote. Sanctuary cities, counties, and states are in the wrong. How is it justice to exempt illegal aliens from the law? Refusal to obey the law of the land ensures domestic unrest. Allowing our borders to be crossed without permission allows individuals who want to destroy America to enter. This interferes with providing for the common defense of these United States of America. The United States of America is a sovereign nation and has the right and duty to protect our borders. Thank you.
So I'd like to comment a little bit about that. For one thing, the state law, I believe it's in the Constitution, is it? The state law that doesn't allow
It's
us
statute.
to use monies to,
Court decision.
it's a court decision to determine that we couldn't spend money to enforce immigration law. All we're doing in this case is restating the fact. We got sued. The county got sued because we held a person believing that we were following the law in our jail for, I think, 1 day, longer than their court had assigned them, waiting for immigration. Is your mic on? Oh, well, I thought it was. Shoot. So I'll start over. So the state law says we can't use monies to enforce immigration law. We're obeying the law. We were sued because we held somebody one day longer in our jail, and that individual sued us and we lost. So we are no longer holding people on ICE detainers. This does in no way mean that, and I think it's an important distinction, is that we are not saying we can protect, nor will we strive to protect people who are here illegally, who have committed a crime. We're just following the law. We cannot say that if somebody came in here, an ICE person came in here, that we would jump to their defense. We're just saying that we will treat everyone equally. We won't turn you down because you're not a citizen, which is what Oregon law requires. So I think that, you know, I'm pretty familiar with the Constitution too, but we lost in a court case and we're not going to lose again. That cost you, the taxpayers, a whole lot of money, and we don't want to do that again. And, you know, that's basically where we are today. Paul?
Yes, so Laura, thank you for coming here today, and with all respect, I think what we're going to hear today and your testimony, that there is confusion really about what this really is. This is not about making this a sanctuary county or state where illegal aliens can come here, commit crimes, and we can't act. And so as you read, if you read the entire paragraph, and you cited the quotation marks here, but if you, the very most important part that's not in your quotation marks, but actually is in that paragraph, is that after the word solely, for the enforcement of federal immigration laws consistent with ORS, which is the Oregon Revised Statutes 181A.820 state law, and with federal law 8 USC United States Code, and cites 1373 and 1644. So if you actually read the language, it does not do what you are assuming it does. So we, as Chair Bernard outlined, we held someone for a few hours because of their illegal immigration status, a few hours longer than we would have held another citizen for the same crime that they had committed or were alleged to have. And that went to court, and we lost. And unfortunately, the Clackamas County taxpayers had to pay out of your taxpayer dollars, paid for that constituent's case, which we lost. And now Clackamas County's case, that case alone is being cited around the country as case law for why we have to treat everyone fairly and equally regardless of their status. And that's exactly what the state law outlines and the U.S. law outlines. We are doing nothing different other than abiding by the law. So this purpose of this reintroducing this ordinance or resolution that we had done a couple years ago is only to restate and to clarify and to create any confusion in that matter. So read it carefully, and we spent quite a bit of time on this to make sure that we were consistent. So I think your concerns actually, if you drill down, are actually addressed.
I also want to mention that when we went to ICE, said defend us, it was a desert. We didn't have, they never communicated or participated in it at all. It was, we thought we were obeying the law. We asked them for help, never heard from them again. So I think that was of grave concern. Ken?
Just to point out a legal nuance that actually is critical in this whole process, and that is that there is a difference between an ICE detainer, which is an administrative action on the part of an ICE supervisor, and a warrant from a judge. And I can assure you that if the law enforcement community here in Clackamas County receives a warrant from a judge, they will comply with the warrant from the judge. That is a legal document and a legal requirement that they would have. So if there is a criminal in their community and they go and they get a warrant from a judge, you can be assured that our Clackamas County Sheriff's Department will honor that warrant and do their job. But they, based on what you've already heard, the detainer has no force of law. And that is where the confusion has been in this process. And I will conclude my remarks with that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
I have one question. How high a court made that decision?
do you remember?
That I don't know.
Which decision?
We can look it up.
That we
On the
lost the
detainer
case?
decision.
I thought it was, I don't know.
State appellate court.
The state appellate court.
But not
Well,
not the
they were
state
wrong.
Supreme- not the state
That's
Supreme
all I can say.
Well, actually, what they did is they actually look at the U.S., the U.S. code and the state law. And again, that's cited in here.
They might have been wrong, but no one went to the Supreme Court to find out.
So, you know, in essence, if you commit a crime, regardless of your legal status, you will be either arrested or go through the same process. This is not a place where you can commit a crime and get away with it because of regardless of your status as a citizen.
Well, I happen to think being an illegal alien is enough of a crime to be detained shortly. So that it is what it is. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Bill?
Thank you. I'd like to thank the chair and the board for having an open, transparent, and deliberative process on the inclusivity resolution. I concur with the board's discussion that the county's ability to provide safety for its residents is limited when a federal agency, according to a long and growing list of court decisions, acts extra constitutionally. As a result, much of this resolution is symbolic, but symbolism is important. And reaffirming policies and procedures through symbolic action is an important aspect of leadership. I have no idea how history will judge this period in time. I don't know what they will do and how they will evaluate the fact that our neighbors are being disappeared. But I'm pretty confident they will ask that question. They will ask the question, what did you do? They have asked that question in the past. To be able to answer that question by saying everything we could is the only way I know of to be on the right side of history. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Amick and Reverend Zachary Harmon. Thank you for coming tonight. Are you Stephen?
I am.
Go ahead.
Chairman Bernard and ladies and gentlemen of the Board of Commissioners, I want to commend you for considering this very important resolution. And I say that it's very important because there are a lot of misunderstandings surrounding these so-called sanctuary resolutions. And I realize you're avoiding using that term, but Commissioner Bernard and I spoke at Senator Merkley's recent town hall about his concern about using that term, and it was primarily, as I recall, that he didn't want to misinform or confuse people who might think that the county could protect them from the onslaught of federal immigration laws and the way that this current administration in Washington seeks to prosecute those laws. And we are talking about law, and as I mentioned to Commissioner Bernard, one of my concerns, I'm a former reporter, and so words are very important to me, and statements are very important to me. And there was a statement today, right here from this chair, that people who are here illegally are committing a crime. And what I want to reiterate, which I told Jim Bernard, was that the mere presence of a foreign national in the United States of America without official permission is not in any way, shape, or form a crime. It is a civil matter and is properly dealt with as such. Now, there may be associated crimes such as entering the country illegally. That's perhaps another matter. But merely being an undocumented foreign national amidst us is not a crime. And crime is very important to me. I spent 25 years as a reporter, more than 25 actually, and at least 10 of those as a crime reporter here in Clackamas County. I got to be very close to prosecutors, judges, defense attorneys, investigators, police officers, police chiefs, the sheriffs in this county over that period of time. And one in particular stands out. They were all fine people, and one in particular stands out. He was an investigator, a homicide investigator with the sheriff's department, who I believe himself was the son of migrant farm workers. And he investigated major crimes such as robberies and murders. And he revealed to me something I hadn't realized, which was going amidst the migrant farm worker community, which includes a number of undocumented workers, as I believe we're all aware. It was very important to establish trust. If that community fears that our police agencies, our sheriff's departments, are going to report them to the immigration authorities, who will then break up their families and send people to countries that perhaps they haven't lived in for decades, that trust is lost and our public safety is at risk. So again, that's only one of the reasons that I support this resolution, but I hope you will pass it unanimously. You have my absolute full support to do so.
Commissioner Schrader.
Hi, Steve. I just wanted to just say hello. It's been a few years since we've seen each other. You visited our farm many times, and we were on the forefront of trying to make sure that the people that worked with us got what they needed. So I remember that, and it's nice to see you here today.
Well, thank you.
Turn you back off. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. As I said, my name is Zachary Harmon. I'm an Episcopal priest that serves at a church in Salem, but I reside in Wilsonville in Clackamas County. Thank you for your time and making space to hear this resolution on inclusivity. I would affirm what was previously said about this being an important symbol. The timing is important, particularly in the wake of what happened in Portland a week ago. And it's being affirmed up and down the Willamette Valley, and that to not make that kind of statement would be something that I think would send a very negative message about inclusivity to minority communities here. And so saying that different groups of people that are minorities should be included and treated as equal is very important. And I can say from serving as an Episcopal priest that we have church communities affected by immigration policies. We had one church up in Gresham, I believe it was, where there was a member who was on DACA status, good lay leader, food bank volunteer, and he was taken into ICE custody, eventually released after much civic action. But this is something that is affecting our communities. There's kids who are afraid in schools. There are families terrified of being split apart. There are families who are split apart trying to figure out how to make ends meet. And so ensuring Clackamas is a safe county for all of its residents is something important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next up, Joanne Forsyth and Kate Rhodes. By the way, Kate, you have two cards in here. I assume there's not two Kates. Okay. This doesn't say anything.
Hi.
So whoever I called up first. Joanne.
I'm Joanne Forsyth. I live in West Lynn in the Stafford area, and I'm here with a small group of citizens. We're no particular affiliation, but we really wanted to show our support for this resolution. Very much our support for the recent ruling that separates the federal jurisdiction from the local law enforcement, and just showing our support for this resolution. And that's all.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Kate Rohde. I'm a retired minister, and I've just recently returned to Oregon, which is where I grew up, but I have been active in the immigration reform issue for about 10 years. As you know, both Presidents Bush and President Obama tried to do something at the federal level. I think most people, no matter what their political stripe, believe that the immigration laws are profoundly flawed and something needs to be done at the federal level, but that has been blocked by legislatures, leaving immigrants and people who employ them in an untenable position, and local law enforcement as well. Now, I want to point out that an awful lot of the immigrants are people who've overstayed visas. A great many of them are white. A great many of our Latino friends were asked to come here, actually recruited to come here by American businesses. So this selective enforcement and the fact that current rhetoric and immigration policies are putting a focus on people who have brown skin, whose family, who may be American citizens, who may not even be Latino, may be Philippine or some other ethnicity, has created a horrendous situation for brown-skinned people of all nationalities, including a great many Americans. And the rhetoric of this recent campaign of the hate directed toward brown-skinned people, we have seen the fruits of that in an uptick in violence against people. Hate crimes have gone up by a third in this country in the last year, and we've seen the terrible results of that just recently in Portland. So I entirely support this resolution, and I would hope that you would consider even looking to make it stronger in the future. Two things that I would like to see you do is to support the separation of our local law enforcement, who I think is really trying to do the job that we have asked them to do and to follow Oregon law. But one of the things that has gotten in their way, they have got pressure from ICE agents not to follow the law, to violate the law. We've talked to local law enforcement, and they've said that's the case. And that ICE agents would be required to clearly identify that they are federal agents, so that local people will not think that they are part of our local law enforcement. That to clearly, if you are in pursuit of your job in Clackamas County as a federal agent, that there will be some kind of identification on your uniform or some other way, so that there's not the confusion. I think our Sheriff's Department has indicated that they feel that confusion exists and that it hampers them from doing their job as law enforcement. So I would like to see as clear a delineation as possible of the difference between the federal agents and our local law enforcement whenever these federal agents are in Clackamas County. The other part of it is I'm hoping that this inclusivity resolution will be communicated to all the law enforcement officials. I know the Sheriff's Department is very clear on it, but I noted in the recent testimony by the district attorney that he saw himself as in partnership with the federal law enforcement ICE agencies, and that seems to be in violation of the Oregon law. And I would like to clarify that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Francisco and Christina Marquez. Francisco Aguirre. I don't see Francisco. I assume it is Francisco. No Francisco? Okay. Let me call up one more then, too. Okay, so this is Carmen Gomez. I can't quite read the last. Are you Carmen? Yes, come on up. All right, go ahead. Thank you for
Good
coming.
morning, Board of County Commissioners. My name is Cristina Marquez. I'm here representing Counsel, which is Oregon's immigrants' rights organization. We have statewide impact, and we advocate for immigrants' rights in Oregon. Today, I'm also there representing a lot of people who call the Clackamas County their home and aren't able to be here because, right now are maybe even picking our fruits and vegetables, or are afraid of even coming to this building. There's been a rise in fear in our communities. People are afraid of taking their kids to the doctor, to school, or even, opening the doors. And thinking that ICE might be there to separate their families. And we've seen cases of that where children have been left without their parents, and it's really devastating when we get those calls and we hear about those people who, because of their country of origin, that they no longer have a dad or mom at home. And while, there's very little that the county can do in terms of immigration enforcement, this resolution really is a good way to show that you are respecting people who call Clackamas County their home, and that you're reaffirming, our values of dignity and respect for all people, and supporting our already, like many people mentioned, our state law, which prohibits the use of city resources or county resources for the enforcement of ICE. And so it's really vital for our families here to hear loud and clear that, Clackamas County won't be doing the work and using your resources to separate even more families. And so I really want to thank you all for considering this resolution, and I hope that you all vote yes today, because again, like I said, a lot of people who are hoping that you'll vote yes aren't able to be here, but I know that there's people who are really depending on this. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Oh, my name is Carmen Gonzalez, but I explain a little bit. I need a little bit help. Cristina Marquez helped me for translate. My English is very poor. My first language is Mixteco. I indigenate from Oaxaca. The third language is English, but I try to learn. That's why I need a little bit. You patient. Thank you so much. Pues muchísimas gracias por escuchar.
Thank you for listening.
Pues estoy aquí, vivo en este condado.
I'm here, I live in this county.
Tengo 30 años en este país.
She's been here for 30 years.
Soy madre de 7 hijos.
She's the mother of 7 kids.
He estado trabajando muchísimo en los files.
She's been a farm worker.
Y pues saqué mis 7 hijos adelante.
And she, with hard work, she was able to raise her 7 children.
Estoy muy orgullosa de vivir en este condado.
She's very proud of calling Clackamas County her home.
Estoy orgullosa de mis hijos que se han graduado en la Wilsonville High School.
She's proud of her kids who graduated from Wilsonville High School.
Ellos pertenecen y es su pueblo en este lugar.
They belong here and they call this place their home also.
Y solo estoy aquí para pedirles que tomen una buena decisión.
And so she's here to ask you all to take a good decision.
Apoyar.
To support.
Y pasar una buena resolución.
And pass this great resolution.
Porque mis hijos, aunque son ciudadanos,
because her children, even with being U.S. citizens,
pero aún ellos existe el temor.
There's still fear even with them.
Yo soy ciudadana igual.
She is a citizen also.
Pero tantas cosas que han pasado las noticias.
But a lot of things that are happening in the news.
Ellos dicen, madre,
they
¿te
say,
vas a trabajar?
Mom, you're going to work.
Pero ten mucho cuidado.
But be very careful out there.
Estamos preocupados porque, aunque tú eres ciudadana,
because we're really worried even though you're a U.S. citizen.
Pero hemos escuchado que han deportado la migración hasta los ciudadanos por el color o su color de piel o de cabello.
We've heard on the news that they've deported even U.S. citizens based on the color of their skin or the color of their hair.
Entonces, hay mucho temor. Nuestros jóvenes, muchos de los niños, no quieren asistir a las escuelas.
There's a lot of fear, and it's impacting our children who don't even want to go to school because of the fear.
Igual, soy una trabajadora de la comunidad, educando a mi propia comunidad indígena.
So she's also a community worker, and she's educating her indigenous community.
Y he escuchado muchas negativas de la comunidad que tienen temor a hacer un reporte si han sido asaltados o cosas, tienen miedo de acercarse a la policía.
And she's heard from working with the community that people are afraid of reporting incidents of hate crimes or assault because of fear of going to the police.
Entonces yo les pido que hagan una buena decisión y sabemos como nosotros, cuando yo era residente legal, yo igual tenía mucho miedo de que me separaran de mi familia.
And so she asks you all to please vote yes, because when she was even a resident, she was really afraid of being separated from her family.
Aunque soy ciudadana,
Even as a U.S. citizen,
aún me siento responsable, comprometida con otros padres emigrantes
she feels responsible and committed to other parents who are immigrants.
que solamente estamos aquí para trabajar,
We're
para
only here to
contribuir
work, to contribute,
y aquí estamos.
and here we are.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next is Chris Duncan. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Chairperson Bernard and County Commissioners. My name is Chris Duncan. I am a West Lynn resident and a fourth-generation Oregonian. My ancestors came from Ireland and Germany. My grandmother told me stories of having to sit around at the dinner table, because this was during World War I, when the bad people were Germans, and they would practice trying to talk in a more American-sounding way and to get rid of their accents because of the treatment that they received by constables and generally the supermarket clerks, and it was just harder to function out on the streets and do their jobs at that time. So as these situations began to permeate again, I so instantly recall those stories of my own grandparents. I understand that scapegoating is a very common occurrence at times when media steers up fear and there's times of economic oppression, which we experience a great deal of that at this time. It's interesting because I spent most of my adult life in a different, far more diverse state. And so coming back to Oregon now for elder care and support in my retirement, I have come to see that Oregon has indeed a lot of catching up to do in terms of understanding really what community relations among diverse populations is really all about. There are lots of good intentions, but it's more of a, well, you come to me and I'll be so nice, not an outreach. So I think resolutions such as what you have proposed today go a long way to putting back toward the frontal lobes the importance of inclusivity and inclusion in a system that we hope provides opportunity for all. On another point, I also serve on as a volunteer on our West Lynn's Public Safety Advisory Board, and I have been very impressed by the discussions that are happening at the local level of how to deal respectfully with all sectors of the population. And I'm just pleased that these discussions are happening at all levels of public service, and I hope resolutions such as these will encourage more of that type of dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect timing. I don't see any other lights on, so I'll make a couple of comments. I remember a family from Japan in Milwaukee, the Endo family, that were taken away in internment camps in, I believe that was Southern Oregon. You know, and the community got together and made sure that they kept their land. You know, they certainly didn't do anything, and Ben Endo, who was probably 4 when he left home, and his brother and his mom and his dad, they came back, but a lot of people did lose their land. Then I think of Italian families, also World War II, who they didn't speak Italian at home, and their kids lost the language because they were afraid to speak Italian outside their home. And then one year I was in this really demonstrates how screwed up federal immigration law is. I was in Washington, D.C., and there was this large group of Irish people there asking for the federal government to, fix the immigration rules, because all of the ones that I talked to were students who were about to be sent home. The other comment, and some of you may remember this, I was born and raised here. My grandmother came from Austria, my grandfather from Holland. And but when we were kids, we got up at 4:30 in the morning and rode the berry picking bus. And, thanks to labor law changes, I was 11. That doesn't happen anymore. And then we say, well, who's gonna pick those crops? I mean, who's gonna do that? I doubt that you'll find a kid 11 years old who's gonna get up at 4:30 in the morning and ride the bus to pick berries. Nor are you gonna find a lot of our farmers in the county are actually afraid that they're gonna lose all their workers, and all of that billion-dollar industry will rot on the vine because we haven't resolved this issue. And there are ways to resolve the issue. It just needs to be done. The farmers are talking about no trespassing signs. Don't answer the door if somebody knocks. Just because it's a police officer uniform doesn't mean they're a police officer. So who can you trust? I mean, that's a big challenge, and we need to resolve this stuff and as soon as possible. But it's a shame that families lose their language because they're afraid to talk in public, that they will be discriminated against. And we're saying that, the county, is here to help. And please, if you need medical assistance, go to the hospital. If you need to, or to our clinics. If you have mental health issues, go. If you get a ticket, go to court. Do the things that you should have the right to do. And while we can't protect you, we can assure you that the county will treat you with the utmost dignity and respect that you deserve. After all, you pay your taxes. Commissioner Schrader.
Actually, that's my.
Oh, that's you.
Yeah, that's my. Commissioner Savas. That's my life.
That's why it says Paul.
Well, when Commissioner Bernard first shared that story about the Italian family and losing the language, I later shared with him, my story, and so I'm a full-blooded Greek. Half my family is very dark-skinned, brown-skinned, if you will, and half my family is very light. I'm of the lighter side. But when my grandparents immigrated over here at Ellis Island in the teens, early 1900s, they were treated differently. Of course, they spoke a different language, but they also spoke English. But my grandmother was very versed in she spoke 13 different languages. So she was able to break a lot of barriers for our family when we were growing up, or when they were growing up, not when I was growing up. When I grew up, I spoke fluent Greek and fluent English. But when I was 5, my parents said, you are no longer allowed to speak Greek. Because of that, because if I did, I would be confused or people would have bias against me. And I didn't understand. I actually resented my parents for doing that. It was kind of an odd growing up until I later realized that my mom, who was dark-skinned, was being treated differently. She was my mom, but she was mistaken for being of a different origin. And again, she was Greek, 100% Greek. I'm 100% Greek. My dad was light. My mom was dark. But people do treat people differently. It's just reality. It's who we. Unfortunately, it's our human nature. But if you're not like whoever we are, you're different. And it's unfortunate. But in the end, when it comes to folks, and I think the concern about a lot of people, regardless what side of the fence you are, people are in this country and they create a crime or commit a crime, they need to be prosecuted, regardless where they come from, regardless of their immigration status, regardless of what. Everyone needs to be treated equally. And we learned the hard way as a county that we can't treat someone different because of that. Everyone needs to be treated equally. If you commit a crime, you are going to be treated equally. You're not going to get away with it. This is not a place where you can come and commit a crime and get away with it because you're from this country or not from this country. So it is something that in my observation, I'm 60 years old, and my observation of watching human nature and how people are, it is unfortunate that we treat each other differently. But I kind of grew up with that. The language thing was something that I really wish I didn't lose that when I grew up.
Chair Bernard.
Oh, yes.
May I have permission to share an anecdotal story as well? As an African American, we're well aware of the number of exclusionary laws that impacted African Americans in the state of Oregon. I think I'm fairly accurate in saying that Clackamas County was founded, in July of 1843, so it's about 144 years old. I'm the first person of color, and I'll just say of a darker hue, to serve at an executive level here at Clackamas County. I remember when I came up to the 4th floor, where county administration is, I was coming down the hall, and there's a water fountain right to the left. I was thirsty. And when I looked at that water fountain, I recalled that there was probably a time when I would have been not been permitted to actually take a drink from that water fountain. That would have been a time of exclusion, but it was a time of inclusion. One more. You know where your offices are, elected offices are? There are 2 restrooms, male and female. And I remember Mary, just beautiful Mary, said to me, you know, Emmett, you could use that restroom. I know it's for the electeds, but you could use that restroom. And I remember the gravity of the first time I pushed on the men's restroom door. It was a time of exclusion, but it's now a time of inclusion. We are making progress, and I think these kind of efforts, the inclusivity resolution, is just showing we're making further steps. I love our Constitution and its preamble. In order to form a more perfect union, we're polishing our imperfections, we're sanding them down, we're smoothing them out. Thank you for letting me share that. It's pretty important to me.
Thank you. Commissioner Schrader.
Well, you're a tough act to follow. And I have so many stories, too, because my mother's family was Italian, all Italian. My father's family was English and Irish. And my grandmother, growing up, was my great-grandmother who immigrated here, and her husband died. So evidently my Italian great-grandmother was forced to put my grandmother Principia and my aunt Michelina in an orphanage in New York City. And so she was, struggling to get along and, living in the tenements. And but every week she would go to the orphanage and visit the kids. And what my grandmother remembers most is her being bald in the orphanage because they shaved all their heads because of a lice problem. So I remember her telling me when I was a little girl what it was like, to go to this table. And she was so ashamed. But the story got more interesting because at one point they actually moved the children from one place to another to a different spot for an orphanage. So the story was my great-grandmother went to downtown to see her children, and they were gone. And she evidently was wailing and crying and just totally beside herself in the streets of New York City. So an Irish cop, came up, and he's like, what is wrong with this woman? And they ran around to try and find somebody who could speak Italian so they could calm her down and let her know, well, this is where your children are. And that was kind of an unforgettable story. And, my grandmother grew up there. She knew a little Italian, but once again, the similar situation where people lost the language. We didn't lose the culture very much because it was an Italian-American neighborhood. But the language was lost, which I thought, and I will always regret that. My father's family was somewhat different. He was English and Irish and grew up in the tenements of Lawrence, Massachusetts, and they were working class. Grandfather worked at a shoe factory. Grandmother was Irish. And I know we have an Episcopal priest here, but here's my story here, is that my grandfather's family, they were the Northams, and they were very English and Anglican. And he married Anne Marie Scannell, who was Irish, and my English Anglican grandmother would always say, "Oh, my boys, they married those Irish girls," which was hysterical, because you're like, really? Because in that melting pot, there wasn't that kind of strife that we saw in the 70s, you know, and with the troubles over there. Those troubles were gone here in the United States. But what's interesting to me is that my grandfather waited. He converted to Roman Catholicism, but he waited until after his staunch Anglican mother had passed away before she did that. So in any case, that was quite a mixing of diversity for my family. But how it all played out for me personally, it will be 47 years ago this summer that I spent, I was an American Field Service student to the Philippines. And I spent 3 months with a family there with over 10 children. And I've told this story before, that when I came back, it was my parents who came from this immigrant background who helped sponsor my Filipino family to come over here to the United States and be citizens. And indeed, they live here today. I see them reasonably regularly. They are physicians, they're doctors, they're lab technicians. Their children are wonderful citizens of the United States of America. But my whole point with my storyline is this, that the way you're raised and the way you look at where you came from will always inform your life and your behavior. So, in any case, thanks for sharing. All right.
All right, one more story. I was born and raised a Catholic, and my grandfather, who came here in 1925 from St. Paul, and we opened a business, and a number of people from a particular lodge were told, "Don't go to that business because they're Catholic." And, you know, being a kid in grade school, we take the public buses. I went to Catholic grade school too. You know, people would discriminate against us. I don't think that happens anymore. I hope it doesn't. But we've all had some discrimination. And I forget if it was you that said that, I can't even remember my quote the other day. Do you remember that? You know, if you don't do something, it's equate. Say that again?
Was it silence is the moral equivalent of consent?
Yeah, and that's why we're doing this today. All right, so any further discussion? I'll entertain a motion. We should read should we do it after? Let's do the motion in a second, then we'll read the resolution. Is that okay? All right.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the resolution.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the resolution for the purpose of affirming Clackamas County as a welcoming and inclusive community. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Ken, would you please read the resolution?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would preface my remark very briefly. There are many poignant stories of immigration that many of our families could talk about. But where I come down on this as a former law enforcement professional is simple. The United States Supreme Court has on repeated occasions affirmed the Constitution, which states that all persons in the United States of America are entitled to due process of law. It says nothing about their status. It says all persons. And that has been affirmed on repeated occasions by the United States Supreme Court. That said, let me begin. Whereas on July 19th, 2012, Clackamas County adopted resolution number 2012-73, valuing diversity in Clackamas County And on October 1st, 2015, Clackamas County adopted Resolution Number 2015-96, valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion in Clackamas County. Consistent with the values expressed in those prior resolutions, Clackamas County affirms or reaffirms and states the following. Whereas our county and county's shared prosperity is the result of the contributions of immigrants, refugees, and people of many nationalities. Whereas the county's cultural and policy environment is made better when all our county's residents fully participate in and are integrated into the social, civic, and economic fabric of their county. Whereas the county acknowledges the inherent worth and dignity of all persons and believes everyone should be treated with respect regardless of race, color, national origin, immigration or refugee status, ethnicity, primary language, religion, gender, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, marital status, mental, emotional, and or physical ability, age, or economic status. Whereas community members have expressed fears regarding access to Clackamas County services, such as health centers and the full range of public safety services. Whereas our county is stronger when all people are free from fear, intimidation, harassment, and uncertainty. Whereas the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners, as the governing body of the county that is home to over 400,000 residents, has identified equity, diversity, inclusion, prosperity, and community livability among its desired outcomes. And whereas Clackamas County has also identified service, professionalism, integrity, respect, individual accountability, and trust as key core values of the county government and leadership. Now, therefore, the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners do hereby resolve as follows. Clackamas County reaffirms its commitment to valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion in Clackamas County by providing stability, opportunity, safety, and justice for everyone living and working in Clackamas County. Clackamas County embraces, welcomes, and celebrates its immigrant and refugee residents to the collective prosperity of all residents. Clackamas County reaffirms its commitment to establishing trust. Clackamas County reaffirms its commitment to the county government's core values of service, professionalism, integrity, respect, individual accountability, and trust. Clackamas County will continue, in a manner consistent with the laws of the United States of America, the State of Oregon, and Clackamas County Code, to prohibit the use by law enforcement of county funds, personnel, and or equipment solely for the enforcement of federal immigration laws consistent with ORS 181A.820 and with 8 U.S.C. Code 1373 and 1644. Clackamas County directs staff to serve all residents of the county, regardless of race, color, national origin, immigration, or refugee status, ancestry, ethnicity, primary language, religion, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, marital status, mental, emotional, and or physical ability, age, or economic status. Dated this 8th day of June 2017 by the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Emmett for your hard work on this and Ken for your hard work on this. We've actually been talking about this for months. So thank you very much for coming today and in support. Commissioner Schrader.
Chair, the one thing I've noticed that I wanted to mention is that I do think it might have been hard for some people to get here because every sign we have here is in English. And it seemed to me back in 2012 we had talked about having other languages in order to help people navigate their way to this spot. So I just wanted to mention that because I think it's something tangible that we need to do to make sure everybody has access to our county and our services.
I'll take it as a direction of staff to pursue that, get back to you.
All right, great. Thank you. All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a reading and adoption of a previously approved land use ordinance, ZDO 264, adopting a zoning and development ordinance 264, amending amendments to zoning and development ordinance to implement changes to the county's marijuana-related land use regulations. Just another one of those, huh?
Could we take 5 minutes?
Want to take 5 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll take a break for 5 minutes.
Put the gavel at
We,
I want to argue with these Dallas stories like that. Well, we're going to get started. I'll let Laurel introduce the next item, ZDO 264.
All right. This is a reading and adoption of a previously approved land use ordinance. It's ZDO 264, which implements changes to the county's marijuana-related land use regulations, and Nate Boderman is going to kick it off. Thanks, Nate.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Nate Boderman, Assistant County Counsel. This morning, I'm here recommending the adoption of an ordinance to adopt previously approved land use ZDO 264, which relates to amendments to the county's zoning and development ordinance related to the marijuana-related land use issues. The new amendments would allow concentrate processing in the exclusive farm use and ag forest zones, add a 100-foot setback to structures used for marijuana edible, topical, and concentrate processing where allowed in those underlying zones. Also establishes a 10-acre minimum for permitted marijuana processing and limits each property to one producer. As you probably recall, end of April, this board recently adopted a separate zoning amendment, ZDO 263, that adopted several other updates to our marijuana-related land use zoning regulations, including fence design standards and certain other changes to the code to conform to changes in state law. The amendment before you this morning is intended to adopt the remainder of the marijuana-related land use regulations that have been recommended by the Planning Commission. The Board of County Commissioners held a public hearing on March 22nd, 2017, and by a vote of 5-0, orally approved ZDO 263 as recommended by the Planning Commission and staff, except that the board deferred further consideration of extract and concentrate processing until May 17th, 2017 hearing. And at that continued hearing on May 17th, the board voted 3-0 to approve the proposal recommended by the Planning Commission, which permits concentrate processing in the exclusive farm use and ag forest zones and adds a 100-foot setback to structures housing those processing activities. The board also voted to adopt standards which establish a 10-acre minimum for permitted marijuana processing and limits each property to only one producer. Staff has drafted the ordinance before you today to reflect the board's decision made on May 17, 2017, to ensure consistency with the remainder of the marijuana provisions in the ZDO and to update references to state governing agencies in the event that the legislature ends up making changes to the state's regulatory system for medical and recreational marijuana. It's staff's recommendation that you approve the ordinance materials which are in front of you today. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I have one question, and I guess I kind of assumed this. I assumed that there was only one license per property for grows too, and that's not true. We have one that has multiple 48 separate licenses, my understanding, or going to eventually. I assume, and I thought either the state law, I know we can't do anything about this today, I know that. I thought the state law restricted it to one license per so many acres.
Well, and I believe, and Jennifer can step in and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe that the state administrative rules restricted licenses to one per address, which doesn't necessarily correspond to parcels or lots or legal units of land. And so if a particular property is assigned multiple addresses, it may be possible under the state administrative rules for there to be multiple producers on one legal lot of record. What we've tried to do is address that particular issue with regards to processing here, but it still doesn't apply necessarily to producers.
So, I mean, this is interesting. So I live in rural 5-acre RRFF5. I don't know how I would get more than one address without dividing my lot up into pieces, which you can't do on RRFF5. It seems odd that somebody, and maybe Jennifer could answer this, it seems odd that somebody could have as many as 40 license on EFU land or RRFF5, I guess, you know, the processing we made is pretty specific, 100-foot, one processing license. I thought that we had one license per property owner. I know it's called condoizing, which I can see you can do in urban industrial areas, but I didn't think you could do that in rural areas.
I didn't know, do I turn this on or do you? You're on. Great, perfect. So I'm Jennifer Hughes, Principal Planner with the Planning and Zoning Division. Couple different things. So first off, the county did not limit, when we adopted our marijuana land use regulations initially, or through these subsequent amendments, we did not limit the number of licenses or the canopy size in our natural resource districts. So EFU, ag, forest, and timber, there is no limit like that. In the RFF5, which you mentioned, we didn't cap the number of licenses, but we capped the overall size at 5,000 square feet. So typically that's going to mean only one license, you know, because the smallest, the tier 1 canopy that the state has is 5,000 square feet. So effectively, I think that's what you'd be looking at. The addresses actually only apply on the medical marijuana side. So medical marijuana, there is some interesting stuff in the rules that talks about per address, which was a little frustrating because we don't really have a mechanism to sort of limit the number of, if somebody puts up 10 buildings on their property and wants to run 10 different agricultural businesses, they're not prevented from having different addresses for those, whether it's marijuana or anything else. So it was kind of an interesting way they chose to regulate it. I don't believe, and I would have to double check, but I don't believe that the per address language carried over to the recreational side. But the bottom line is OLCC is not limiting the number of licenses per property. They are limiting the canopy size per license, based on whether you're tier 1 or tier 2, indoor or outdoor. But you could have 50 licenses if you have enough area on your property to make that work, and they're all separately.
Yeah, for separate addresses. But since when have we given addresses to greenhouses? Are they getting mail? You know, it just seems, it's kind of, they found a loophole to get in there and do.
Circumvent.
To circumvent the rules, really, and the whole idea that, you know, marijuana is legal, the legalization of marijuana to create these industrial areas within agricultural zones, and forests, but not our RFF5. So at least some neighborhoods would be protected.
I guess the fundamental question is there anything we can do about it?
Certainly, you could propose to amend the code. It would not be retroactive, so people who've already lawfully established would have a nonconforming use. And it would require notice because you would be restricting a right that they currently have. That doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that we would have to send out, you know, the postcards that, you know, I know many of you are familiar with that we've done in the past, where we let them know that we would be restricting a use that they can currently do. So that would be part of it. But yes, you could certainly proceed with an amendment like that. And as with any other marijuana regulation, it becomes a question about whether the regulation is reasonable. But, you know, limiting licenses per property is something that I believe other jurisdictions have done.
Thank you.
Yeah, the problem is that we have spent so much time on marijuana, and we have so much more to do. This would probably delay us, you know, another year on the work we're doing. So, I don't know, I guess. Yeah, well, let's go Sonia and then back to you.
So I have a question on what we're considering today. And
Sure.
looking back at what the Planning Commission recommended, and on page 2 of the materials, it says, do not apply a 150-foot off-site structure separation standard, 1,000-foot buffer from residential zones, or a 20-foot minimum. So I'm looking through the ordinance. I have the red line version. I'm just looking at where we incorporated the buffer for what the Planning Commission's recommending. I do see on page, on the interlineated version, on 841.5, paragraph C, I see the 100 feet, but I'm not seen the other references. So if you could
So-
just point me to where that is, that would be
So
great.
the Planning Commission did not recommend that you adopt those things. The version that they sent to you for consideration had the 100-foot setback only. So no structure separation, no lot size minimum, and no just sort of overall buffer from residential. They recommended that that not be done. Then the board added in a lot size during your hearing. So you've got both the setback recommended by the Planning Commission and the lot size that the board asked for. But those other two items, the residential buffer and the off-site structure separation, were not recommended by the Planning Commission and not added back by the board, which is why you're not seeing them in the packet.
Okay.
Okay.
Paul. So myself and Commissioner Schrader couldn't be here on that particular day, so as cited in the packet, it was a 3-0 vote. So and coincidentally, exactly what Commissioner Bernard raised at the beginning here was my concern and what I wanted to speak about then, and I want to speak about today. I have an issue with that, and to kind of even complicate this even further, and you know, this is not a can of worms. This is like an oil tanker size of worms, right? So I'm going to be very careful not to complicate this anymore. But the last paragraph, which starts out with the words "for consistency," I'm just going to jump down to the one sentence. You know, it's where we are accommodating and accommodating and accommodating. We haven't yet seen one dime of revenue. This has cost us more than any other exercise we've ever been in, staff time and anything else. But where it says this permits an applicant to aggregate contiguous lots under the same ownership for the purpose of complying with the standards. And I don't know is it really, Jennifer, is it really truly limited to that purpose only? At the second half of the sentence?
So
For the purpose of complying with the standards. So is it vague that that can't be interpreted for other standards?
I mean, I don't think so. This was something that was actually part of the first phase that you did under ZDO 263, where this had come up where outside of this process in question, just generally for permitting for growers to meet our minimum lot size, the ability, because we do have a minimum lot size for growing as well, that somebody could say, well, I have a 3-acre piece and a 5-acre piece next door to each other. I want to, well, they wouldn't need 5, so that's a bad example. 3 and 2, and I want to put them together to meet the 5-acre minimum and do, you know, so I can grow on that site. And essentially that had kind of been happening anyway because the language seemed to permit it, but it was not as clear as it could have been. And so we brought that forward and said, should we clarify this and say that that's permissible to aggregate? And that was approved under ZDO 263. So then essentially what staff's doing is saying, well, we would carry that same way of evaluating the minimum size of the property into these processing regulations. So if somebody has 2 5s and they're under the same ownership, they could aggregate that and make it a 10-acre parcel in order to have the one processing license that they're permitted to have. So I do believe that's clear, yes.
Okay, well, as far as the condoizing, if you will, to steal that term from Commissioner Bernard, I know that we've heard that kind of a term before. My concern, knowing that the very principle of our EFU is for agricultural purposes, and to someone be in the business of buying a property and then leasing out that's more of a commercialization. It has really nothing to do, it's profit driven, right? It's not, you're not going to grow anything by making money on renting out or subdividing your EFU lots. Really what's really is happening here, which is now allowed. And myself and Commissioner Fisher attended at the NACO conference a couple weeks ago, a session on marijuana. We had people from other states there, Humboldt County, others sharing their experiences, in Deschutes County, which has actively got a little bit different version of their regulations, which actually there's some certain things they did that appealed to me. So we should have done that, we should have done this. But I just got concerns about really that element of commercialism that has nothing to do with agriculture, period. Even marijuana to that extent, other than profit. And the other thing that came up at this conference was that we are already cognizant, everyone seems to be that's aware of this, that we already have sufficient supply of raw material, marijuana, enough for processing. We have the means. We are above the capacity of the state, right? And to issue one more permit to allow one more entity to continue this there's two things wrong with it. Number one is that the concept that which was passed by the legislature was seed to sale, that we would monitor the amount we were growing, so we would grow what we need, okay? And number two, once you know that you're growing more than you need, which we're already there, and no one's arguing this at this point, you were contributing to interstate commerce, which is against federal law, okay? And has its own ramifications. So I almost feel party to really the being in the wrong of all those things that are just number one, fundamental, number two, fundamental to what the legislature said when they passed all of this, that we were going to monitor this, and their goal to eliminate the black market. Well, we're not accomplishing any of that, nothing of that. In the meantime, the quality of life for citizens in this county is being diminished by those activities and some of the people that don't want to comply. They don't want to be good neighbors. And I don't want to cast that across the whole marijuana industry, because that's not true. There are some very stand-up people that are trying to be good neighbors and do all those good things. But we're exacerbating this. We already have enough product to meet the recreational use, which I think what Measure 91 was all about, to all the people that I spoke to that support it, that don't consume marijuana. So it shouldn't be a crime for someone. That's their belief, and it passed. But not at this industry level, this exploitation of this, and to the compromise of this very citizens who founded this, part of them, their families founded this state. It's just an imposition, and I'm, on one hand, I want to support it. On the other hand, I think it needs more work. I think this whole condoizing thing is a big issue. That's a commercialization. That is people and activity beyond the means of which infrastructure can support that. And we don't have to pass this today. We can, or we can refer it. So my question is, basically to Commissioner Bernard's point, is that, and I agree, we don't want to drag this on another year, but if we are to make some revision in this that would address what we're talking about, which maybe we do have a shared 5-person concern about that, I don't know, maybe we do, maybe we don't. But if we did, how much time would it really take?
Well, first of all, I don't think you'd really be revising this per se. I mean, all you're doing here, and I'm certainly not telling you that you need to approve it, but is adding the concentrate processing in the EFU and Ag Forest, 1 license per property, 10-acre minimum, 100-foot setbacks. There's no other changes being done here. So if you want to go down this road, which is what I'm hearing about restricting the number of licenses for growing, it's a new amendment process. We haven't notified at all for that. We had a couple study sessions on marijuana-related topics, and the determination at the second one was to not move forward with anything that required wholesale notification of all property owners, that was beyond the scope of what the board wanted to take on at that time. So essentially, we'd be starting over. How long? The quickest really is probably something like 90 days, and I'm just sort of saying that off the top of my head if we were to start working on it right now. It's not on our work program, so the board would need to sort of officially, you can do that, obviously, but add it to the work program and initiate a set of code, whatever code amendments you're looking to do.
So once we say we're going to look at condoizing and not allow it, does that stop an applicant?
No.
No. So we could just have a deluge of condoizing our agricultural fields.
Unless you act as quick as possible to limit that damage.
So, this is a great discussion I sent an email to Mike and stuff today about, I'd like to take a look at our schedule and maybe consider pushing McLaughlin corridor ahead. It might be something to talk about, also looking at that issue in our schedule, I think we should add 10 more people to staff, but we didn't budget for that. But that might be something we want to talk about. So I'll ask, and if you guys are okay with this, I'll ask the administrator to move things around and try to get Mike's schedule before us to reconsider the timing of the various processes. We've done this every year, all the time. It bugs me, but I never caught this issue before. I just assumed the state would.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
not to steal the thunder, but you know, I do realize that I'm a pretty analytical person, and after a while, when you start hearing all those details, a person who's analytical may be drowned out by people who don't want to delve in the details, but, and I don't want to open up that tanker-sized can of worms here today, but I think we've got to realize this, and actually, after following the budget meeting and my questions to the sheriff about enforcement on marijuana, not illegal marijuana activities, but illegal activities on marijuana properties or properties in which marijuana activity is taking place, some of the behaviors are not, this is not what Clackamas County is about. The behaviors and civil obedience and disobedience in this case is not acceptable, and we've got to have the means to enforce this. The revenue is inadequate to enforce it. There's a lot of complications. I gather that some of this is related today and some of it's not, but the point is that we need to take as much corrective action on behalf of our citizens for the safety and welfare. I mean, let alone compliance with law.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't want to, you know, it's kind of like the pressure of energy driving down McLaughlin South and marijuana and the other various things we're looking at. We got to get ahead of them, and so I think this is a discussion we need to have with Mike and his staff on how we could do that and try to address these issues.
Well, we need to have another day or two of a retreat, I think, to talk about some big picture stuff.
And have some of those people come. I need to go to counsel first because he may have something to say.
But some of those comments had a legal implication. I'd like to have Nate speak to them.
Well, and Commissioner Savas raised an issue that I think is worthwhile to highlight as a feature of our ordinance, because recall marijuana regulation, that this is a state law mandate, and so this was passed as a ballot measure. This was reaffirmed by the legislature, and so marijuana regulation is the county's attempt to further restrict what is already required under state law, right? And so in our ordinance, we're very clear that in order to comply with the state law mandate, what we're doing is adopting regulations to restrict what's otherwise allowed. And so this isn't something that we have the right to outright prohibit or otherwise, you know, restrict beyond a reasonable measure, which is the language in the state law. But again, especially with changes at the federal level and new administration coming in, we're very sensitive and cognizant of you know, making it clear that what we're doing is further restricting what we're otherwise required to do under state law, and otherwise required to allow under state law.
That's why I'm going to support moving this one forward today and talk about what we do in the future.
I just have a follow-up question to Nate's comment, and that is that, yes, I'm hearing it right, some of this is compliance with state law, but some of this is not contained in here today. Was that some of this is about our own regulations and also allowances. So we in a sense, a portion of this is actually accommodating above and beyond compliance with state law.
Well, I don't know if that's necessary.
Especially on the part where it says the aggregation of lots, right?
The aggregation of lots is more, I think, I would characterize as an administrative tool to help us understand which properties, where we're going to define the properties for purposes of establishing a licensee or a licensor's operation. Do we use a lot of record definition? Do we use parcel lot or tract, I guess, is really the concept that we're getting at here. And again, that's more of a function of how things are defined in our code rather than, I think, any sort of attempt to broaden or restrict what's allowed under state law.
Yeah, like my neighbor has 13 acres, but 2 lots. And so, I mean, there's nothing there but grass. And you're just saying he can grow grass. I mean, you're just saying that we could now combine. We could combine the one that's 7 acres with the one that's 8 acres or whatever it is, and then he could build one facility, but it'd still have to be 100 feet from the neighbor property line.
But otherwise, he wouldn't be able to. And that's the accommodation I'm speaking to.
Well, is that true?
To your point, we could redefine that in a manner that is more restrictive. And so that's, again, we're talking about matter of degrees and how we administer our code.
So would that be a substantive, a big change today if we change that word?
From I forget how we defined it, if it, because it's not defined as a
Draft
tract,
it.
is it?
And we'd be striking some language,
W-
so it would be,
yeah.
a new, you know, we wouldn't have to re-notify, but we would have to come back.
Yeah, we'd certainly want to have time to rework that and catch all the cross-references in the code.
Although to clarify, to continue with the example of growing grass, which I thought was great, what that would mean in the two examples is you would define it by parcel, which means you would have two separate operations with a buffer for each parcel, even though it may run right down in the middle of what is a collective operation. You would just sort of create a bifurcation there.
It almost allows more than less.
That's right.
You can go either way, I guess is what I would say, and the administration or the definition is not intended to do anything more than give clarity to the staff as they're administering the code about how they're supposed to understand the business that is making the application, how they look at the land that's being presented to them, and formulating it. But overall, the state has said, thou shalt allow, and overall, our marijuana code is saying, we shall, but with these reasonable restrictions. So we are sort of going a little bit tighter than what the state law sets as the baseline.
Ken, and then Martha.
In the first place, I happen to have come across the same thing as you did, which is the condoizing aspect of things, and I'm not enamored with that, so I'd be more than happy to work on that issue. In terms of a comment that Commissioner Savas made about a sufficient quantity available, you might have to do some research on this, but I would like to know if that is a legal basis for denying subsequent permits. If we have sufficient for our current market, which was the intent of the state law, could we then turn around and say, okay, we've issued all the permits we're going to issue until such time as demand exceeds supply? I don't know that we can do that, probably can't, but I would like to know for sure.
No, that would be, under our current ordinance, that isn't a criteria, and so that's the.
I understand that.
That's
I'm
the clearest.
just wondering if that is an ordinance, if that is something that we could codify. I'd be curious to know.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not necessarily advocating it, I just would like to know. And then the final question I have is for Jennifer. When you aggregate lots, do you combine them and create a single new parcel?
It
under the
doesn't.
law, or do they remain separate parcels?
They remain separate parcels, but they would have to remain under the same ownership for them to remain in compliance with their permit. So if they were at some point in the future to decide to separate those, then they would no longer be able to do marijuana processing if they didn't have 10 acres anymore. So, yeah.
Since virtually all land is a result of subdivision decisions made in the past, in terms of the current lot sizes that any of us may enjoy, is there anything to prevent you from requiring them to combine them into a new single lot?
I don't know how, that's an interesting question. I don't know how they would do that. If they're already, typically if they're subdivision lots, for example, they would effectively have to vacate or replat that part of the subdivision in order to legally eliminate the lot. Usually they're not subdivision lots. That would be more unusual in the rural
I'm
area.
using the term subdivision in a generic sense.
Yes, right. Once a legal lot, kind of always a legal lot under our code. So I think that would be difficult to do. We could make them, I mean, yeah, I don't think we could really. It would be a fundamental restructuring of the way lot of record is understood, and to do that in the context of just marijuana would probably be a concern. I'd have to think about it, but I think that would be difficult. It would be preferable if you are adamant that you don't want to allow them to be aggregated. And really what that does, I think, is what Commissioner Savas said, fewer people will qualify for processing.
If you don't aggregate.
If you don't permit aggregating, correct.
So
But
that's
if the
sounds to me like that's the better approach.
I suppose it depends on whether you're trying to limit the number of processors or whether you think that 10 acres is really the important standard. If the important standard is 10 acres for a processor, then whether you aggregate or don't, you get the same outcome, 10 acres, 1 license. But if the goal is to limit the overall number of processors in the county, then the more restrictive you are with regard to the lot size, the fewer people will qualify.
Thank you.
Martha.
I forgot what I was going to say. No, only kidding here. So what I'm garnering today is that the suggestion is to pass this because we're only changing a piece of this, and this new issue that we've just brought up about the aggregation is something that needs to be worked on a future work plan. So my suggestion would be then let's get this piece of it done and talk to your, department about how we do it in a work plan and do a, as we said, a retreat as soon as possible.
I don't think this would require a work plan. We could
You change it.
notify and make an amendment in a future hearing without notification, correct?
So there's two different, I think I'm hearing two different things on the table. I just want to make sure that
Yeah,
I
yeah.
understand. There's the condominiumizing
Yeah,
of
that's
grow,
different.
of production. That's launching a new process. We need to put it on the work program and figure out timing-wise how that fits in with the things that are already also on the work program. The aggregation standard is really before you now, and essentially staff's recommendation is to treat it the same way that you already approved for growing. So under ZDO 263, you already permitted people to aggregate to meet the minimum lot size for growing. Staff's recommendation is that administratively, it's easier for us if we treat it the same way. That's not to say we cannot do it differently. We can. And if you want to do it differently, then what we need to do is set this over, just change that provision because it's consistent with what we've notified for, and come back to you with a slightly revised ordinance.
Might be worth doing. So it doesn't increase the staff workload much.
Not significantly, that's
Not
correct.
significantly, but the condoizing is another story.
Okay.
That's another story.
That's
So,
correct.
Let's defer it.
Well, would
yeah,
the
let's
chair,
defer it.
would the chair entertain a motion to table?
Yeah, and then, do we need to set a time certain? No, okay. All right,
In the context of the discussion that we had and with respect to the issue you just addressed, I would move that we table this issue and bring it back at a future date when you have answered the question or addressed the issue.
So you want to not permit aggregation? Is that what, because we do need to know what the change is. Okay, so it's a 10-acre minimum.
For processing.
Yes, for processing, 10-acre minimum lot of record instead of allowing aggregation. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, maybe a work session to just clarify that, or just you come back to us in a setting in which we can, I think, absorb that. I think Jim's example of the 13 acres, knowing he had the 10 here, obviously, I'm assuming, let's say 1.7 and 1.6. You know, what that means, number one, as you mentioned, in the for a grow, this is more of a clarification, no, it's a clarification, right, as to what standard to use as far as aggregation.
For the processing,
Let
since
me-
this is a new use that you're going to permit and you want a minimum lot size for that, it's just a matter of deciding how you want us to apply that minimum lot size. The 10 acres is what was agreed to.
Mr. Chairman, let me withdraw the motion and restate. I'll move that we table this pending further discussion with staff and the board at a subsequent work session.
Second.
any further discussion? Moved and seconded to table this issue for a future work session and meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
Sorry,
All right.
Jennifer.
Where are we? What's the next item on the agenda?
I got this. We actually have 3 public hearings, and they are related, so I will introduce all 3 of them. We have Ron Warenga is going to be talking about all 3 of these. The first is a hearing, a first reading of an ordinance establishing rules and regulations about sanitary sewer and surface water management services. The second is, you will put on your hats as the board of the Surface Water Management Agency of Clackamas County to approve a supplemental budget resolution, and then you will change hats to become the Tri-City Service District Board to also approve a supplemental budget resolution or to consider approval. So with that, Ron, would you like to take it?
So, in this particular one, our hats remain the same.
This particular one, you are still the board.
Well, for this, your initial action is the first reading of an ordinance for the Water Environment Services 190 entity. So you should be gaveling yourself out as the Board of County Commissioners and gaveling yourself in as the governing body of Water Environment Services.
Sorry.
Okay, that's what you said. I was-
Yeah, but it's just a reading. You're not taking any formal action at this time, but technically that's the hat you're wearing while you listen to the reading.
All right. Go ahead.
Good. Good morning, Commissioners. Actually, afternoon now. I'm Ron Wieringa, a division manager with Water Environment Services, and I'm gonna present the ordinance to you to consider adoption of rules and regulations for the Water Environment Services Partnership, and then I'm going to switch out with Doug Waugh, who's going to cover the supplemental budget items. So I appreciate the opportunity today to present this ordinance to you for establishing rules and regulations for the West Partnership. As you are aware, because we've been having quite a few conversations recently, that the West Partnership is a partnership of our sanitary and surface water districts. And as we go through, that was recently established by the board, and as we go through a process to transfer assets and budget to that partnership, one of the things we need to do is to create tools to help us manage those assets. And one of those tools, or those tools include our rules and regulations governing the use of the infrastructure, the design, the construction, as well as giving us the authority to ensure that it's appropriately used and protected. And so that's what we're here to talk about today. Currently, the Tri-City Service District and the Surface Water Management Agency of Clackamas County have a set of administrative rules and regulations that govern the sanitary and surface water designs, infrastructure, and standards. As a new entity, the Water Environment Services Partnership needs rules and regulations as well. Exhibit A in the ordinance that we've provided to you, or in that exhibit, we've presented West regulations that are a compilation of the existing rules for Tri-City Service District and for the Surface Water Management Agency. They've been updated to include chapters with rate zone specific requirements, and then also basically just appended the existing rules for the two service districts respectively, applying to rate zone 1 and 3 only. I'll note that any changes made to our existing rules for Tri-City and the Surface Water Management Agency were purely for spelling, punctuation, formatting. Are no policy changes and no substantive changes to those ordinances currently. We're just need to have something in place by the time the assets transfer and by the time budget is adopted to implement in those areas. We wrote a chapter 1 in the rules outlining the existing relationship between the districts and the West Partnership, and explains how all of the provisions listed in their rules apply to which particular areas. And what you'll also note that the new regulations that we put before you in the ordinance don't apply to the Service District 1 at this point, which we call Rate Zone 2. Even though it's part of the partnership and inside the boundaries, an application of rules to CCSD 1 will be made in the future when we bring it in. We're targeting July 1, 2018. We are planning a comprehensive rule and regulation rewrite to bring to you at some point next year. We've budgeted funds in the current budget to do that. We've had conversations with you about the need to go through some of our rules that have been around for a while, and we haven't updated some of our design standards, some of our fiscal policies. We're need some significant discussion and consideration on your behalf. So we will plan to bring those to you at some point in the next year. So at this point, staff recommends approval of the ordinance before you, and I'm happy to address any questions that you may have.
Any questions of staff? Okay, so entertain a motion to read ZDO 264 by title only.
I move we read the ordinance by title.
Oh, wait, I just moved down up to the wrong one. I moved to the other one. So, all right, so any clarifying questions? None? No. I'll open the public hearing and ask if anyone would like to speak on this matter. Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing and ask that a motion to read the ordinance by title only.
I move we read the ordinance by title only.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to read the ordinance by title only. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Ask the clerk to assign a number and read the ordinance by title only.
Okay, this is going to be ordinance number 10-2017, an ordinance establishing the rules and regulations of water environment services for sanitary sewer, surface water management services, and declaring an emergency.
Any further discussion? Do the commissioners have any proposed changes or amendments to the draft amendment at this time?
No.
So I guess I just need to announce that the second reading will be on Thursday, June 22nd, 2017, at the regularly scheduled business meeting. And now we're going to change our hats.
Now, you have to call the roll. All in favor?
No, the vote was just to read by title only,
Yeah,
but
but they made a motion.
We already voted to read it by title only.
Right.
there's
adopting
no
at this
vote on
point.
adoption. It's at the second hearing that they would vote on the
I
adoption.
know, but you made a motion to read it by title. Someone made the motion, it was seconded. All in favor?
We did that?
We did that.
Okay, I missed that.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right. So we are now recessing the Board of County Commissioners and convening as the Surface Water Management Agency for Clackamas County, at which we have some more information.
We have Mr. Wah here. I'll note in the previous conversation, it also said declaring an emergency. The emergency is not with respect to the timing of the adoption, but the date of effectiveness of the ordinance. We're scheduling it to be effective on July 1st so that when the WES entity becomes up and running with its new budget, that the ordinance is in effect at the same time, so they're all in sync. But now we're here to talk about SWIMAC.
Good afternoon, Board of Directors for the Surface Water Management Agency of Clackamas County. This is a very similar thing to what Ron was just talking about. We need to create the funds and the budget for the WES partnership going forward. We're looking today to start that path, combining the Surface Water Management Agency budget with the Tri-City budget in the WES partnership beginning July 1. So to that effect, this supplemental budget for the Surface Water Management Agency of Clackamas County is necessary to accomplish the integration of the district into the municipal partnership by the end of this fiscal year. There is no request for additional operating expenditures being made at this time, to be very clear. The supplemental budget simply allows the budgetary transfer of the district's anticipated end-of-year reserves into WES in accordance with Oregon budget law. The attached resolution reflects the changes requested by the department in keeping with a legally accurate budget. These changes are in compliance with ORS 294.473, which allows for governing body approval of supplemental budget changes for items 10% or greater of the qualifying expenditures of the budget funds being adjusted. The required notices have been published. The Surface Water Operating Fund is requesting to recognize additional net working capital and miscellaneous income. This fund is also transferring from contingency and appropriating all of the previously unappropriated ending fund balance and additional revenues to allow for a special payment constituting the entirety of fund reserves remaining at the end of this fiscal year to be made to the WES Surface Water Operating Fund. Staff respectfully recommends approval of the attached supplemental budget resolution and Attachment A in order to maintain a legally accurate budget during the integration of the Surface Water Management Agency of Clackamas County into Water Environment Services.
Okay, any questions? Let me find out where I am. I'll open the public hearing and ask if anyone would like to testify on this matter. I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the resolution for supplemental budget greater than 10% for Surface Water Management Agency of Clackamas County.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we approve of the resolution for supplemental budget greater than 10% of the Surface Water Management Agency of Clackamas County. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Next item, I'll announce that the board will adjourn as the Surface Water Management Agency and convene as the Tri-Cities Service District for the next item. I think we should always have hats that maybe we just turn them around.
It'd have to be a 9-sided hat.
Hats.
10-build hat.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Board of Directors. This is a supplemental budget for the Tri-City Service District, which is necessary to accomplish the integration of the district into the municipal partnership known as Water Environment Services by the end of this fiscal year. No request for additional operating expenditures is being made, to be very clear here. This supplemental budget simply allows for the budgetary transfer of the district's anticipated end-of-year reserves into WES in accordance with Oregon budget law. The attached resolution reflects the changes requested by the department in keeping with a legally accurate budget. These changes are in compliance with ORS 294.473, which allows for the governing body approval of supplemental budget changes for items 10% or greater of the qualifying expenditures of the budget funds being adjusted. The required notices have been published. The Sanitary Sewer Operating Fund is requesting to recognize additional net working capital and miscellaneous income. This fund is also transferring from contingency and appropriating all of the previously unappropriated ending fund balance and additional revenues to allow for a special payment constituting the entirety of fund reserves remaining at the end of fiscal year to be made to the West Sanitary Sewer Operating Fund. In a similar fashion, the Sanitary Sewer System Development Charge Fund is requesting to recognize additional net working capital and miscellaneous income. This fund is also transferring from contingency and appropriating all of the previously unappropriated ending fund balance and additional revenues to be allowed for a special payment constituting the entirety of fund reserves remaining at the end of the fiscal year to be made to the West Sanitary Sewer System Development Charge Fund. The Sanitary Sewer Construction Fund is requesting to recognize additional net working capital and miscellaneous income. This fund is also transferring from its contingency and appropriating all of the previously unappropriated ending fund balance and additional revenues to allow for a special payment constituting the entirety of fund reserves remaining at the end of this fiscal year to be made to the West Sanitary Sewer Construction Fund. Finally, the State Loan Fund is requesting to recognize miscellaneous income. This fund is also appropriating all of the previously unappropriated ending fund balance and additional revenues to allow for a special payment constituting the entirety of fund reserves remaining at the end of the fiscal year to be made to the West State Loan Fund. So it's really a one-to-one transfer is what we're doing from fund to fund, from Tri-City to the West Partnership. Staff respectfully recommends approval of the attached supplemental budget resolution and attachment A in order to maintain a legally accurate budget during the integration of the Tri-City Service District into Water Environment Services.
You will also note that coming up on July 29th, during your budget hearings, you will see an adoption of authorization of funds for the Water Environment Services entity, which will ensure that these transfers are tracked separately, so we're able to track back the source of funds, which district coincides with which rate zone, so we can ensure that the ratepayers who contribute to those funds are deriving the benefit of those funds.
Exactly.
Okay, any clarifying questions? I'll open the public hearing and ask if anyone would like to testify on this matter. Don't rush up here. Close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the resolution for a supplemental budget greater than 10% for the Tri-City Service District.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve a resolution for supplemental budget greater than 10% for the Tri-Cities Service District. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And now I will announce that we will adjourn as the Tri-City Service District and reconvene as the Board of County Commissioners for the remainder of the meeting and ask the clerk to read the consent agenda by title.
Okay, the consent agenda under Health, Housing, and Human Services, approval of a construction contract with Jim Smith Excavation for the Addy Street Improvement Project in Gladstone. Approval of agreement with Clackamas Women's Services for Camp Hope 2017. Approval of an intergovernmental agreement amendment with Oregon Department of Education Early Learning Division for Healthy Families Program. Approval of Amendment Number 2 to the Intergovernmental Revenue Agreement with Oregon Department of Education Early Learning Hub for Focused Child Care Networks. Approval of Amendment Number 17 for the Intergovernmental Agreement with the State of Oregon, acting by and through its Oregon Health Authority for operation as the local public health authority for Clackamas County. Approval of an intergovernmental revenue agreement with Lane County for online food handler training and testing project. Approval of an intergovernmental agreement with the State of Oregon, Department of Human Services, Aging and People with Disabilities Division for the provision of the Oregon Money Management Program in Clackamas County. Approval of Amendment Number 2 to the agency service contract with Clackamas Women's Services providing temporary emergency housing. Approval of Amendment Number 1 to the agency service contract with Northwest Housing Alternatives, providing financial assistance and temporary emergency housing. Approval of a grant agreement from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Continuum of Care Program for the Hope 2 leasing program for the purpose of providing permanent housing. Approval of an intergovernmental agreement with the State of Oregon, acting by and through its Oregon Health Authority for operation of the Community Mental Health Program in Clackamas County. Under the Department of Transportation and Development, a board order designating maximum weight limitations on Fabian Loop Road and Sutter Road. A board order designating a temporary maximum weight limit on Coon Road. Approval of a revision to the board-approved revenue renewal of a franchise agreement with Waste Management of Oregon to operate the Clackamas County Garbage and Recycling Transfer Station. A resolution to approve the 5-year Transportation Capital Improvement Program. Approval of a professional services contract with Applied Pavement Technology to develop a comprehensive transportation asset management strategic plan. Under elected officials, approval of previous business meeting minutes. Under administration, approval of a board order for the Clackamas County Resolution Services as the eligible grantee for community dispute resolution funding as determined by the Oregon Office for Community Dispute Resolution. And board authorization to sell real property received via the City of Damascus Disincorporation, Damascus Lane. Under County Council, approval of a transfer of a remnant parcel of land located in the vicinity of Sunnyside Road and 162nd Avenue to Suntree, Inc. A resolution allowing ministerial signatures by authorized signers to improve efficiency in contract execution. Juvenile, we have approval of Amendment Number 5 to the intergovernmental agreement with Multnomah County for assessment and evaluation beds. Approval of Amendment Number 7 to the intergovernmental agreement with Multnomah County for secure custody detention beds for juvenile offenders. Under Business and Community Services, approval of a construction and access agreement with Portland Water Bureau on Clackamas County property. Approval of a modification of a grant agreement between Clackamas County and the USDA Forest Service, Mount Hood National Forest, for the Dump Stopper Program. Approval of an intergovernmental agreement between Clackamas County and Clackamas Education Service District for internet service. Under North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District, approval of an amendment to the Metro Nature and Neighborhood Capital Grant Contract for the Spring Park Natural Area Enhancement Project. And that concludes today's consent agenda.
Paul?
Yeah, well, good job, Mary. That was a mouthful. As always, did a great job. Chair, instead of just pulling an item for discussion, I just want to just speak to one item before I actually make the motion to approve the consent agenda. I want to speak to item D2, board authorization to sell the real property received via the City of Damascus Disincorporation. And I do want to say that I still have, this is my 7th year of saying this, concerns that we address the needs of search and rescue. The volunteers who work without pay, who are finding themselves using their own monies to gas up their rigs, to go and help and assist, whether it's the Sheriff's Department or whether it's the fire department folks, and on behalf of our citizens. And it still astonishes me that 7 years later, we're still working on this, that all the properties that either the Sheriff's Office has access to, the fire district has ownership of, that we still can't find a spot for 2 or 3 or 4 vehicles to park rigs in. This is something that has been, I know we're working on it, and maybe a portion of these proceeds can go to a temporary solution, ideally a permanent solution, but this is something that we need to address absent those volunteers and some of the expensive equipment in which they maintain, which they need cover out of the weather. This seems to be taking a back seat, and it's not a front seat issue. And 7 years, I know that some of our folks here have expressed that, but I don't see a path, and I don't necessarily know that we'll actually have a solution for this, but it needs to be addressed. And with that, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I will second, but I'd like to ask Ms. Buttman if she could give us an update on the negotiating processes that are being worked on regarding the search and rescue group.
Certainly. We have been working diligently to try to find a solution. We've got some options, and I'm hoping to meet in the next week or so with the search and rescue folks. I know that one of the search and rescue groups has been able to renew their lease where they are, but the other two still need space. And we have an offer of some temporary space, and we also have our eyes on a project up on the mountain where we are demolishing the old Boderman Center, and I've been working with county parks and asked them to preserve the slab instead of demolishing that as well, in the hopes that we can perhaps build something for them up there. So I'll be talking with search and rescue about whether those are good options for them, and we'll see how we can proceed. And I'll get back to you as soon as I know more.
Which answered my second question. Thank you.
Maybe some of those marijuana condoizers can find a location for emergency vehicles to park. All right, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. County Administrator updates.
Okay, well, we have not had our regular business meeting for a while, and I have a boatload of good news, and I am not going to read it all today, in the interest of time. I'm going to read one short item, and then I also have an announcement related to some changes in your Board of Business meetings coming up I want the public to know about. So Water Environment Services, who we just heard a lot about, supports the Kellogg Good Neighbor Committee by providing a portion of Milwaukee ratepayer funds to improvement projects. Beginning this week, nearly $20,000 of those funds will be spent on added trail lighting behind the Kellogg Water Resource Recovery Facility along the path near the Willamette River. Wes is working with Milwaukee to inform the public of the project and its benefit to the community. And a reminder, so next week's business meeting, June 15th, will be at 10 a.m. The board will no longer have evening business meetings on the third Thursday of each month. Beginning July 20th and 2017, the third Thursday of each month, the board will hold public meetings as the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District Board, and those meetings will be located at the North Clackamas School District Administration Office Building at 12400 Southeast Freeman Way, Milwaukee, at 5 p.m. The location is subject to change due to availability.
Okay, we'll start out with Commissioner Communications. Commissioner Schrader, you're next. I can't communicate.
Okay, I'm going to be short too because I'm going to be speaking at a women's leadership group at 1 o'clock, which is one of the things I wanted to mention. Today, the 304th Air Force Rescue Division is being deployed to the Middle East. They're the second group to be sent out. It's taken a while because they've had issues with airplanes. So be safe, and we'll be tracking our forces and trying to help their families as much as we can while they are gone serving their country. We finished the budget. And basically tomorrow I'll also be working at the Association of Oregon Counties Housing Subcommittee, where we're looking at housing issues statewide. And Commissioner Savas, I'm sure, will relate that he and I met with local businesses to discuss the location of a transitional shelter for veterans this last week, as a matter of fact. And let's do arts and culture activities in the county. That's the next thing. All right, Wilsonville Stage presents Naked Darrow. Naked Darrow is a provocative look at our most hated and revered attorney, Clarence Darrow, as his great mind slips away. Friday, June 9th, 7:30 p.m. at Charbonneau, and Saturday, June 10th at Clackamas Community College, Wilsonville, 7:30. Clackamas Repertory Theater presents Wing It for Kids. Children will have fun helping 5 silly creatures get out of a jam and learn their lessons when they misbehave. Amid singing, dancing, singing, much laughter, and little yelling, our 5 friends will eventually solve the problem of the day. That's Saturday, June 10th, 10:30 a.m. at the Osterman Theater on the Clackamas Community College campus. Finally, Godspell will be wrapping up at the Lakewood Theater this coming weekend. For more information about any event, you can go to the clackamasartsalliance.org.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, I just want to say impressions on our budget process. I'm really proud of Clackamas County moving forward with the maintenance budget and the hard work of the budget committee, all the questions, all the review, and the excellent presentations from our staff. I want to really commend our county administration for creating a format that was so good to follow and really helped us tie performance measures, key results to what we're actually funding in our budget. And it's a nice time to enter Clackamas County. As a Board of County Commissioner, when we have done so much work, I know we have much more work to do to get all of our departments online, including the Sheriff's Office and District Attorney. But it's a good time to be part of the budget process, and we did good work, so I want to just congratulate everyone for that. And just as a little aside, as I go out and connect with our communities, I have to tell a story. I know we're short on time, but I was up at Barlow Wayside Park on the way to the mountain. It's just off of 26. It's a county park. And if you don't know about Little Joe Creek, I just want to tell you, it's right off the beginning of the trail, and you can go and you can stand on a platform on Little Joe Creek and see many little itty-bitty salmon that are there and are growing, and they will make their way out to the ocean and back to that spot, and it is spectacular to see right in our county park. Shout out to Mitch Williams, who was involved in making that happen for Clackamas County, and I encourage everyone to get out there and see that. It is pretty great.
Great. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, well, as Commissioner Schrader alluded to, last Friday we spent most of the day talking with businesses in regards to the homeless situation that they're dealing with, as well as the one that we're trying to help with. And so it was interesting to get the kind of feedback. And just a couple days ago, I received an email from a constituent out of Malala with regards to comments I made or cited in the newspaper or paraphrased in the newspaper about the urban rural reserves. And then last evening in my community, hearing some, I thought, refreshing comments from some of the presenters about the homeless and the needs in the community, and people that are hungry, children that are hungry, and so forth. And you know, I don't know how vivid the problem is in Malala or how it is in Sandy or other areas of the county, but I see it every day. Every day I see these folks, and I see what they're going through, and the impact that it has. And to read an email like that, and perhaps I'll send the copy of actually what I read, so that maybe the context is fully there. I'm not really sure what the sources are. You know, we're up here trying to help. We're up here trying to help, and there's some big picture issues about prevention, and there's some big picture, some immediate issues as far as trying to deal and cope with what we've got. But I stand by everything I said, proudly. But I think it really goes to the fact that, you know, whether it was Friday, talking to businesses, or whatever the issue is, what goes on in people's backyard or in their neighborhood is important to them. And I think we need to realize that this really is about community, and we ought to realize that if we're up here doing our work, that we kind of respect one another and look at it, what is we're really saying. And if we don't understand, ask, and try to sort out. And even amongst ourselves, I constantly find that maybe sometimes we're not listening well enough to one another. And whether that's a discussion me and Jim had before this meeting started this morning, or whatever it may be, but we need to communicate. And we need to communicate with others. And I know that sometimes things get political, and or there's other motivations for some criticisms, and I'm willing to take those, because I think when we run for office, we got to realize that we're in the crosshairs But I stand by what I said. I stand by how I said proudly. And a lot of the decisions that we made here today and a lot of things we discussed, that this ain't about me. It's about our community. It's about the people who elected us to do what we need to do. And this situation we've got in the region is an important one. It's not just Clackamas County. It's clearly a bigger issue in Portland. And I really appreciate, actually, and we need to recognize this, as much criticism as Portland and Multnomah County get, they have been a lot more effective of addressing this issue than we have. Far more effective. And we have a lot of catching up to do. Their ability to, number one, to have resources, which I'm envious of. Their ability to be nimble, even though when the resources are there, you still need to be nimble. But they've demonstrated both the courage, and the ability, the competencies, and the skill sets in order to make those things happen. And I do take some pride that it was a year ago that we got a $300,000 budget accommodation for this veterans deal. But with some humility, it's a year later, and we have it still not to fruition. And I do appreciate, I want to make sure I acknowledge this, that my colleagues, all of us, are very supportive of this and want to make sure that we have this shelter up before the weather comes in the fall. And I know that everyone cares about that very passionately. But I think we have a lot of work to do, and we need to recognize where good work is being done. Though it's not in our county, good work is being done, and there is ways, and there are models to follow, and there are examples to follow. And it's not as though we need to reinvent the wheel. I think our staff are doing a great job of trying to communicate with one another, and I want to recognize their ability and their compassion they've brought to the table. But we've got to figure out a way to work together and direct staff on whatever the issue may be, to work from department to department, in a multidisciplined effort to acknowledge what it is we're trying to do. And on the budget, we do want to speak to the budget. Yeah, I think overall we had a very good process, but in the end, what we just scratched the surface of is really what I'm talking about, big picture-wise, what it is that we want to do as a commission, as the elected leaders chosen to do so, in a way that we actually point the county towards some initiatives that we want to take action on and get our multidisciplinary staff, department heads and so forth, and point this county in a way that we can accomplish those things. And I really feel that the budget, or budgeting money to do that, is an important part of that. And not necessarily the opportunities lost, we can make budget amendments, but that isn't the time to look at the big picture and also the details as well to get that. Because if we don't have the resources, the financial resources to do it, but only the will, then we haven't accomplished that. And I think that was a lot of my efforts, the points that I was trying to make during the budget cycle, both this cycle and past cycles, and our financial health and what we are directing resources towards it best accomplishes those outcomes. And we need to be very clear on what those outcomes are. And I know it's been late. It's 12:30. We've been at this for 2.5 hours, so I'll leave it there for today.
Commissioner Humberston.
Well, thank you,
I've been
Mr. Chairman. You have been practicing. I'd echo Commissioner Fisher's comments with respect to the budget process. It was quite a learning experience, and our staff, I guess I would say, held our hands through that process very admirably, and it was much appreciated. I also appreciate Commissioner Savas in his straightforwardness as we work together. We don't always agree on how we want to get to where we want to go, but we generally agree on what the goal is. And the fact that he states what he thinks and stands up for it means that when you're talking with him, you can actually negotiate solutions to problems and not worry about hidden agendas. So it's a pleasure to deal with that, even though we come from different sides of the political spectrum. I would point out that about a quarter of our budget, which is roughly $250 million, comes from state and federal government. And it supports a good portion of the health and human services issues that we have to address on a regular basis. Unfortunately, that's an unstable source at this time, given what's going on in Salem as well as in Washington, D.C. So our maintenance budget, I believe, was a prudent approach. until such time as we know what our revenues actually are going to be, because if they are cut, we're going to have to make some significant adjustments in our whatever reserves we have available to us to try and backfill health and human services issues for those that are the most needy. I'll leave it at that and go to our dogs today.
There's more than one?
We have two. So, the best things come in pairs. 2 shoes, 2 scoops of ice cream, and 2 chihuahuas. Chica and Chiquita are 2 sisters looking for one home to call their own. They are social little girls that love to snuggle and go for walks. They can be quite goofy once you get to know them. Chica is the more outgoing of the 2, and Chiquita is a little more hesitant at first. If you're looking to open your home to a couple of wonderful little dogs, it may be the perfect match. For more information about Chiquita and Chica and other adoptable dogs, please contact Clackamas County Dog Services at 503-655-8628 or www.clackamas.us/dogs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And to listening to one another, did you say something, Ken? I know. I thought our budget process was good. I think, it'd be great if we could find a way to add planning people to kind of get through this schedule of work. We've been delayed over and over. Lots marijuana and urban rural reserves, a major cause of that. And then last night I went to the Oak Grove area to talk about the importance of getting ahead of growth that is moving down McLaughlin, and the fact that one project which may be approved really is not part of what the community was hoping would happen there. It's just not part of the vision or the dreams of the community, and is going to take away a piece of property that could potentially create jobs, and instead it'll be probably have 2-3 people working there, and it'll be taking up a lot of land. But I was thinking a lot, as we were talking last night about what happens in Portland, and the fact that Portland itself is creating homelessness and hunger too. And that is because the state has not addressed the issue of how to fund schools, how to build a school. So the voters in Portland pass a bill to pay for schools, and it's going to cost the average homeowner $400 a year. Well, for somebody on a fixed income, $400 could push them out of their home. It could certainly cause hunger. But it seems that we always pass measures that add more and more to property taxes, and and consequently every apartment that exists is going to take into account that tax increase, raise everybody's rent. So it's just this vicious cycle that we need to figure out, and that is, how are we going to fund and maintain school buildings throughout the state without having to constantly put the burden on the taxpayers to fund these capital projects. And I vote for capital projects. I voted for Clackamas Community College. I voted for many of the school district when I lived in Milwaukee capital projects, because we have neglected them for a long time. And we have roads that we've spent literally billions on roads, and they're decaying. So one of the things we're looking at, and that won't be a property tax, is user kind of fee, which is a vehicle registration fee. You drive a car, you pay for the roads. I heard somebody yesterday or the other day in Salem is, once you create a tax, it never goes away, it always gets higher. And I'd just like people to remember there used to be a $3 tax on studded tires. They took that away, and still we have studded tires that destroy our roads. That tax helped maintain roads. It's gone now, and so taxes do come and go, and that one never did increase. They changed the type of stud that they use, from steel to aluminum, I think. And aluminums are supposed to be less impactful on roads, but that's not true. So I think we need to talk about how we can help reduce homelessness and hunger by looking at how we pay for our capital investments. And also want to bring back next week, I know, Martha, you had to go, please feel free. I'd love to get our planning folks in to talk about how we can look at that schedule and revise that to get ahead of some of this growth that's happening on McLaughlin, and also to address some of our concerns about marijuana and condoizing and all those issues. I hate to have marijuana back at the table. I thought that someday we'll get rid of that issue, but it appears that it will never happen.
Keep on it.
So with that, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.